What is that? Consent of the governed, right? That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power, not tyrannical power, but their just power from the consent of the governed. So it's a symbiotic thing. We allow them to have control over us because we give them just power by our consent. So, the government to control the governed. That's a big thing. And at the same time, oblige it to control itself. Do you understand that the Constitution is a limit on government? It limits government. Through the 20th century, we decided that the Constitution, the way we read the Constitution, if it doesn't say specifically that I can't do it, then I will. Is that how it's written? No. But we've gotten by with that through the 20th century. No, it gives specific enumerated powers. If it doesn't specifically tell Congress that they can do it, the rule is you violate the law if you do it. Now, what happens to people usually when they violate the law? They should be punished for violating the law. So why do we keep voting the same morons into office when they violate the law? Because of the John Dewey Model Public School. The interest of the man must be connected. I already read that one.
A dependency on people.
What's that?
A dependency on people.
Next paragraph.
Next paragraph, yeah.
Next slide, right?
Yep.
Trying to trick me. Trying to trick me. All right. I'll be watching you. Your grade will reflect that. A dependence on the people is, no doubt, the primary control on the government. Why is that? Because many times we're referred to as the supreme authority, whereas the Constitution is the supreme law. Big difference between the authority and the law, right? A dependence on the people is, no doubt, the primary control on the government, but experience has taught mankind the necessity of auxiliary precautions, the internal controls on government. We are the external control on government, but government must have internal controls. And those internal controls must be based on natural law. If Congress voted tomorrow for gravity to be gone, is anyone going to float to the sky? No one. So this is why they had to take it out of the hands of man and put it in the hands of God, these internal controls, right? This policy of supplying by opposite and rival interests the defect of better motives might be traced through the whole system of human affairs, private as well as public. We see it particularly displayed in all the subordinate distributions of power, where the constant aim is to divide and arrange the several offices in such a manner as that each may be a check on the other, that the private interest of every individual may be a sentinel over the public rights. These inventions of prudence cannot be less requisite in the distribution of the supreme powers of the state, but it is not possible to give each department an equal power of self-defense. Now, they are separate but equal branches, right? But equal doesn't mean the power. They will each have different powers. And those powers, although they're not equal, they're set up in such a way that the threat of attack, that the defense doesn't have more than the threat of attack. Anybody ever realize what the problem is to taking on bullies? I'm a guy that hates bullies. I absolutely detest them. The problem is when you get into the business of dealing with bullies. there's a huge propensity that you can become what you hate. There's an old saying that says, I stared into the abyss until I saw myself staring back. Right? So, we've got to be very careful because men are not angels. And we detest bullies, and we have to take care of bullies, but we have to be very, very mindful and cautious that we don't become the bullies that we hate. This policy of supplying by opposite and rival interests, this is what he's talking about, the defect of better motives, might be traced through the whole system of human affairs, private as well as public. We see it particularly displayed in all the subordinate distributions of power where the constant aim is to divide and arrange the several offices in such a manner as that each may be a check on the other, that the private interest of every individual may be a sentinel over the public rights. These inventions of prudence cannot be less requisite in the distribution of the supreme powers of the state, but it is not possible to give each department an equal power of self-defense. In Republican government, not democracy, in Republican government, the legislative authority necessarily predominates, right? It's the largest and most powerful branch of government. The remedy for this inconveniency is to divide the legislature into different branches, bicameral, and to render them by different modes of election and different principles of action. So how is it if your state representative is picked by a popular vote and your senator is picked by a popular vote? Is it by two separate modes? So we have stripped the internal architecture of a safety away in the 20th century, 1913 to be exact. Do you see why it's bad? The remedy for the inconveniency is to divide the legislature into different branches. So you've got the House of Representatives and the Senate, and to render them by different modes of election and different principles of action. The House of Representatives was supposed to have the interest of the people at heart. Who were the senators supposed to have the interest of? The state. Do they anymore? Absolutely not, because of the mode by which they are picked. So it is a popular vote. So who do they try to woo? The state or the people? The people. So do you see the problem? Because we were supposed to have a bicameral legislature that is now broken. Do you see the problem? Do you see how it's become so detestable since 1913? 17th Amendment was a horrible, horrible amendment. Right along with the 16th.
And there's never been any attempt to try to change it.
Nope.
Anywhere.
My people are destroyed by lack of knowledge, by ignorance. So the remedy for this inconveniency is to divide the legislature into different branches and to render them by different modes of election and different principles of action as little connection to each other as the nature of their common functions and their common dependence on the society will admit. It may even be necessary to guard against dangerous encroachments by still further precautions, as the weight of the legislative authority requires that it should be thus divided. The weakness of the executive may require, on the other hand, that it should be fortified. So we've just discovered the problem with the legislative branch. Right there. 51. 51. If the people would have known Federalist 51 in 1913, do you think they would have voted for that amendment? No. But 1913 with Woodrow Wilson was the first time we had state-sponsored propaganda, state-sponsored propagandists that were pushing narratives. to get us into World War I. Woodrow Wilson told his propagandist, you need to turn the people into war-loving patriots for me. And he did. And he did. So to get the 17th Amendment passed, so that we could go closer to a direct democracy, all we had to do is keep the people ignorant and tell them, well, we need the 17th Amendment because the legislature of each state can call the senator back at any time. And if they're in session, boy, that could really cause a lot of problems. Although that had never happened, they convinced the people with that lie to vote for the 17th Amendment. And we've been living the tragedy ever since. Now, there's only one thing that keeps us a republic and not a full-blown democracy. And that's the Electoral College. Why do you think the progressives are pushing so hard and you've got a whole bunch of Republicans, neoconservatives, that are also practicing socialism, that want a national popular vote, interstate compact? Why do you think that's so? To push us into a direct democracy. That's the only thread that's holding us in a republic. Do you understand that? Okay. It might be, let's see, on ordinary occasions it might not be exerted with the requisite firmness, and on extraordinary occasions it might be perfidiously abused. May not this defect of an absolute negative be supplied by some qualified connection between this weaker department, and what's the weaker department? The Senate, right? Okay, so the weaker department of the bicameral legislature is the Senate. That's what he's talking about. Supplied by some connection between this weaker department and the weaker branch of the stronger department, by which the latter may be led to support the constitutional rights of the former. So he's talking about the executive, which is the weaker branch, and he's talking about the Senate, which is the weaker of the legislature, the weaker section of the legislature. So he's talking about between this weaker department, the presidency, and the weaker branch of the stronger department, the Senate, by which the latter may be led to support the constitutional rights of the former without being too much detached from the rights of its own department. This is why the vice president is the president of the Senate, and this is why the president doesn't get to put just anybody he wants. It has to be through consent and advice and consent of the Senate, the weaker department, the weaker part of the stronger department. Does that make sense? If the principles on which these observations are founded be just, as I persuade myself they are, and they be applied as a criterion to the several state constitutions and to the federal constitution, it will be found that if the latter does not perfectly correspond with them, the former are infinitely less able to bear such a test. There are, moreover, two considerations particularly applicable to the federal system of America, which place that system in a very interesting point of view. First, in a single republic, all the power surrounded by the people is submitted to the administration of a single government, and the usurpations are guarded against by a division of the government into distinct and separate departments. In the compound republic of America, oh, there it is. There it is. So I love it when I ask people, especially these scholars, what is America? I've heard, well, it's a constitutional republic, or I've heard it's a democracy, I've heard it's a democratic republic, which is, to me, is an oxymoron in terms. What are we? What form of government do we have? Let's go right to the horse's mouth. Right there is the type of government that they are setting up. He didn't mince his words at all, did he? It's right there in plain English. Right there in plain English. In the compound Republic of America, the power surrendered by the people is first divided between two distinct governments, and then the portion allotted to each subdivided among distinct and separate departments. So, we are a compound republic. Why? Because Montesquieu, who wrote The Spirit of the Law, who was the quintessential expert on all republics, both ancient and modern, said you cannot have a republic on a large tract of land. In fact, in the Federalist Papers, when they were arguing this, and Madison said, well, we've picked a republic because of what Montesquieu said. The Anti-Federalists shot back and said, aha, that's why you're wrong, Madison, because Montesquieu said we can't have a republic on as large of tract of land as what our colonies are. So you're wrong. This is what he went, aha! You're an idiot, because we are a compound republic. Each state will be broken up into smaller republics that have to be represented for Article 4, Section 4, which guarantees you a republican form of government must have. Your republic must be represented. Each republic must be equally represented. So thereby, even though the federal is broken up into three, and there's representatives from the state, which is the Senate, and representatives from the people, which is the House of Representatives, in your state, it's broken into three branches as well, where each one of your districts, each one of your republics needs to be represented in the legislature and in the state senate, correct? And then it's broken up into smaller republics with greater power called counties, or in Louisiana they call them parishes, right? And in that county or parish, do you have a legislative body? Most certainly do. It's usually called a county commission. That's a legislative body. Do you have a judicial? Yeah, it's usually called a district court. Right? Do you have an executive? That's your sheriff. And two states were stupid enough to vote their sheriffs away for a centralized single police force. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. This is the compound republic that he's talking about. Remember, 39 talks about the spheres of control. It says that the local doesn't have any more control in the federal sphere, no more than the federal has any control in the local sphere. By design. This is what he's talking about. Now, why did they break it up like that? Because these people that we're putting into those positions are not angels. So there needs to be internal controls on government. And the Republican form of government allows for that, whereas the Articles of Confederation did not, and a democracy does nothing but breed destruction. Does that make sense? So the next time somebody, when you ask them what kind of a government we have, and they tell you it's a constitutional republic, the word constitution is an ancient word for contract. Can I contract to tyranny? Most certainly can. So we are not a contracted republic. We are a compound republic. And we're contracted as a compound republic. Madison's words in 51 right there. Did I finish that one? In the compound Republic of America, The power surrendered by the people is first divided between two distinct governments. What are the two distinct governments? Federal and state. And that was supposed to bring about a security to the rights of the people even at that. Because there's two distinct governments, federal and state. And remember, the federal can't exist without the state. Madison told us that. He told the anti-federalists, don't worry about this federal government. It's not going to usurp the state power because the federal government can't exist without the state. Well, if that's the truth in this compound republic, the state can't exist without the county government, can it? And the county government can't exist without the township government, can it? Who collects the taxes? Who collects the property tax? County or township? Township. Do you understand where government gets its money from? It doesn't produce a product and sell it and then take the proceeds and do things for us, does it? That's why I hate when people go, well, that grant's free money, John. No such thing. No such thing as free money. It was taken from the people somewhere, right? So if that's the case, who's the most powerful government? The people that start the money trail, right? The most powerful government is township. But townships can't exist without what? We the people. So do you understand why the Constitution starts out, we the people? It already told you who the supreme power was right at the beginning. So this idea that somehow federal government is supreme over all is hooey. They are the bottom of the swamp. They are the least powerful government there is. Your township government is the strongest and most powerful government there is. And that's the one government nobody wants to spend the time to get involved with. Every 4 years we want to get involved and start hurling insults at each other and rah, rah, my guy. Rah, rah, your guy. There isn't a decision he's going to make that's even going to affect your life immediately. But your township supervisor and that board of 5 people sitting right there are going to, they're going to affect your life instantly with whatever they make an ordinance on, right? That's law. That's your legislative body. So why aren't you at your township meeting? Those same people that are sitting on a school board, they're the ones that are going to influence the minds of your children. Why aren't we there? Oh, well, John, all my kids are graduated. They're still taking money from you. Why are you not going to that school board? As a grandpa, that I don't even have kids in that school district, I better be at that school board. Because they're taking my money and pushing ideology that I would not even talk about in my house. If somebody did, they would find themselves upside down and in the parking lot. Guarantee it. But yet I allow them to take my money and use it for that ideology? I think not. So where are we? Where are we? Hence, a double security arises. Remember, two distinct governments, federal and state. Hence, a double security arises to the rights of the people. The different departments will control each other at the same time that each will be controlled by itself. So do you see what he's talking about here? 3 branches of government should be butting heads with each other and fighting each other and leaving the people alone. Does that make sense? But through the 20th century, we allowed them to divide and conquer. We allowed the 3 branches of government to kind of coalesce into one. And we sit around at coffee and complain about the government, which demonstrates our ignorance. Because there's a multiplicity of governments, not government. That shows how ignorant we are. There's governments. And we've allowed them to divide and conquer us. It really became evident with Obama. Did it not? The Manchurian. The oldest tactic in the world, if you read Sun Tzu, will tell you that divide and conquer is the oldest military tactic in the world. Is it not? Well, the three branches were supposed to be fighting each other, not us, but they've coalesced into one group with a fourth estate of government known as the propaganda arm of mainstream media. And in there, they're trying to divide us between black and white. They're trying to divide us between urban and rural. They're trying to divide us between poor and rich. They're trying to divide us between Christian and non-Christian. They're trying to divide us between straight and gay. They're trying to divide us completely. And who is the supreme power? We the people. And we've allowed ourselves to be divided and conquered by governments that were supposed to be under our control. Who are the idiots now? I am, for allowing it to happen. Second, it is of great importance to a republic not only to guard the society against the oppression of the rulers. Let me read that again. It is the great importance. What would a great importance be? Could we call that a duty? Could we call that a duty? Okay, so let's read that with the word duty. Second, it is our duty in a republic not only to guard the society against the oppression of the rulers, but to guard one part of the society against the injustice of the other part. It's a duty. How many times do we sit back and we'll watch a neighbor have their rights trampled on, but we won't get involved because we don't want to be a target? Happens in Hillsdale daily. We'll read the state-sponsored propaganda and whatever the reporter went and asked the elected officials, well, what happened? They give a narrative. They don't ask any questions. They print that. Everybody reads it and goes, well, I know that guy. Well, I didn't know he was a piece of crap like that. Well, he's not. You're reading the state narrative, the propaganda. Get involved. Because, see, when one of your rights are walked on, and I don't say something, it's just a matter of time before it's my turn, isn't it? We have a duty amongst all of the citizens to make sure that we keep the government from trampling on other people's rights. What's going on with the people at J6? Come on, we all know. We all know that that's horrendous. It goes against all that we know is holy to not allow people exculpatory evidence for their defense, to hold people without bond, without bail. We violated so much of the Bill of Rights, it's not even funny. And why? Because one guy that was wearing our jersey went ahead and got the Patriot Act passed. We should have stripped him of his jersey. He wasn't what he said he was. That was horrible. And we sat by and let it happen. When the government goes after your neighbor's rights, you have a duty to stand and defend that neighbor's rights. Because when they take your neighbor's right and you don't say anything, it's just a matter of time before they come for yours. And when they come for your rights, you're going to be screaming to high heaven, why aren't people defending me and coming to my aid? The question is, whose aid did you go to? We reap what we sow. It's a duty. Second, it is of great importance in a republic not only to guard the society against the oppression of its rulers, but to guard one part of the society against the injustice of the other part. Different interests necessarily exist in different classes of citizens. If a majority be united by a common interest, the rights of the minority will be secure, will be insecure. What's he talking about? Faction. Faction. Do we see what's coming out of California? Do you see that an ideology that only encompasses about 17% of the people is forced down our throats daily? It goes against what most Americans